After traveling through Tokyo for 16 years, Anhe always believed that he was an honest and sunny Sanhao high school student, until he met a young girl who ran away from home in the middle of the night and heard the inappropriate narration in his mind keywords of the novel. My voiceover is not very serious without pop-ups, my voiceover is not very serious. Download the complete text, my voiceover is not very serious. Read the latest chapters. Chapter 1. A Girl from Home and Unscrupulous Voiceover. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. A Girl from Home and Unscrupulous Voiceover. Late at night, Tokyo, Shibuya Ward. Farewell to the convenience store where he worked, and he walked into the rain with an umbrella in one hand, holding a dessert gifted by the enthusiastic boss's wife. The rain is not particularly heavy, but it always gives off a chill in Tokyo at the end of November. Even late at night, vehicles still pass by on the road, and the occasional splashes of water splash high, which causes Anhe to be distracted and alert. After all, he didn't want to get wet from the rain and instead be splashed with sewage. Let's change jobs tomorrow. This boss has ulterior motives. Although she looks good and has a good figure, unfortunately, I can't beat her husband. Anhe was thinking about it when another car sped past, splashing water from the rolled-up tires. Fortunately, he reacted quickly and promptly blocked the umbrella in front of him, so he didn't get wet. Looking at the distant taillights, before Anhe could say anything, a voice of anger and frustration appeared in his mind. I call you a fairy's house bored. Looking at the disappearing taillights, you are very angry in your heart. Fortunately, you just noticed that there is a young man sitting in the driver's seat, with a ring on his ring finger. It is obvious that this is a newlywed husband. With this in mind, a meticulous revenge plan appears in your heart. You can accurately find his house through his license plate number, and before he finishes work, his house will only have his newlywed wife. The voice in his mind was still chattering incessantly, but Anhe ignored it. Obviously, it was not the first time he had heard this voice. It seems that since birth, this voice has been constantly appearing in Anhe's mind from time to time. At first, he thought it was his golden finger after crossing over, but soon he gave up the idea. After all, a disdainful narrator who encourages him to commit crimes all day can also be called a golden finger. Confession. This foolish idea flashed through your mind, but soon you set it aside because you noticed that there seemed to be some situation across the street. The sound that reappeared stunned Anhe, across the street. Although he knew that the narration was unreliable, Anhe instinctively turned his head to the opposite side of the road and looked through the rain curtain. Anhe quickly realized what the situation referred to in the narration was. It was late at night, so theoretically there shouldn't be many people on the platform, but at this moment, there was a girl wearing a JK uniform lying on the side of a lounge chair. The girl seemed to be asleep, her snow-white and round jade legs exposed, although her face was not visible because her hands were covering it. Taking a second glance at the girl, Anhe quickly derived a set of data based on past life experiences. 87, 61, 83. It's really big. With a sigh in his heart, Anhe planned to withdraw their gaze, but the narration in his mind rang out again. Late at night, a sleeping girl who had not boarded the last bus left home. You connected these words in your mind and soon had some thoughts. Someone will always take advantage, why can't that person be you? Thinking of this, a hint of greed flashed in your eyes, even if you were planning to walk towards the girl. God, there is always someone who can take advantage of me. Why can't that person be me? Anhe swore that if this narrator had any substance, he would definitely come up with two big sinuses. How could Golden Finger encourage the host to commit crimes like this? The most important thing is that after the narration, Anhe is really a bit excited. Shaking his head, Anhe quickly put aside this dangerous idea and dared not continue to see the girl. He hurriedly walked forward. If we stay any longer, Anhe is really afraid that he will not be able to control himself. After finally rebirth, it would be embarrassing to have to spend the new year in prison. Finally, save you once again, break free from the vulgar taste of dopamine, and pursue higher levels of endorphins. As a teenager, you should not stop here, don't let desire take over your body. He sternly warned himself in his heart, and Anhe couldn't help but accelerate his pace, and soon disappeared into the rain curtain. More than 10 minutes later. Standing panting at the bus stop, Anhe couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief as he looked at the girl still sleeping in front of him. He used to be almost home, but for some reason, he felt a bit uneasy all the way, constantly imagining scenes of the girl being dragged away by others. In the end, under the instigation of conscience and a little bit of selfishness, Anhe finally found it back. Fortunately, the girl is still lying here well. Careful glances at the other party, Anhe couldn't help but guess before praising himself that this girl was indeed beautiful. Even though her white lotus-like arms covered half of her face, they still couldn't conceal the delicate appearance of the young girl. A waterfall-like long hair spread out, narrow eyelashes trembled slightly, and the delicate cheong nose was slightly red from the cold due to the weather. Accompanied by symmetrical breathing, mist occasionally spat out from the girl's vermilion lips. The girl's upper body is a blue uniform jacket, with an orange sweater and a low-necked vest inside. She is also wearing a white short-sleeved shirt at the bottom. However, due to the girl's innate talent, the collar of the shirt is bulging, as if the button will bounce off at any time. The top was very short, and lying flat on the lounge chair, she couldn't help but curl up, revealing the girl's small navel and soft, boneless waist. Perhaps because she was sleeping too soundly, the girl's sleeping posture at this moment was not very elegant. A pair of white and slender legs were bent and closed in an inward 8 position, and the gray-black pleated skirt was slightly flipped up due to her movements, revealing a hint of spring light inside. Pure white without any pattern. Quickly averted his gaze, Anhe silently recited his guilt in his heart. However, the narrator in his mind clearly didn't want to let him go like this. Looking at the sleeping girl in front of you, your heart was filled with excitement. Coincidentally, there was a couple's hotel nearby, and you believed that based on your past life experience, this girl would completely surrender to you in just one night. Animal. Anhe spat fiercely at the dog's spear, and the narrator quickly shook his head, completely throwing away those unwanted thoughts before coming to the girl. Looking at the scene so close that she had never seen it in her previous life, Anhe took a deep breath and then reached out to pat the girl's arm. I didn't wake up, I patted again, but I still haven't woken up, and he couldn't help but feel a wave of shock. Can someone sleep so soundly? Looking around, except for occasional passing cars, there was no one in sight. After hesitating for a moment, Anhe still reached out and moved the girl's arm over her face, revealing her delicate face. But even with such a large gesture, the girl still didn't wake up. Seeing this, Anhe simply squatted down parallel to the girl and then pushed her head with his hand, shouting, "Classmate! Classmate!" After shouting 4 or 5 times in a row, the girl remained unresponsive. If it weren't for the rising and falling chest and the slight breathing sound in the girl's mouth, Anhe would have thought he had encountered a corpse. It's difficult to handle. Seeing the girl unable to wake up, Anhe lowered his head and glanced at the time on his watch. At 11:47 p.m. late at night. Thinking that she still had to go to school tomorrow morning, Anhe couldn't help feeling a bit helpless. If possible, he really doesn't want to be late on the 3rd day of school transfer, as it would be too damaging to his image in the eyes of school teachers and classmates. She called a few more times, and even in the end, Anhe pinched her nose for more than half a minute. After the girl still didn't wake up, Anhe decisively gave up. He doesn't have time to waste anymore. I'm sorry, I'm doing it for your own good. As he spoke, Anhe reached around the girl's waist and reached out to her armpit, while the other hand picked up her calf and picked it up. The girl's body was very soft, and when she picked it up, it was like holding a balloon filled with hot water. But even with such a large gesture, the girl still didn't wake up. Instead, her small head leaned directly against Anhe's arms as if she had found some warm place. shrugged his shoulders. Anhe didn't say anything, swept around, and after confirming that he hadn't left anything for the girl, he walked straight towards home. Just didn't take 2 steps, Anhe stopped again. The rain is still falling, and now he is holding the girl with both hands, unable to free his hand to hold an umbrella. It's feasible to go home in the rain, but Anhe is afraid of getting the goods in his arms wet. Of course, Anhe didn't care about the girl, but was afraid that he wouldn't be able to resist her wet body temptation when he got home. So, this umbrella must be supported, but how to support it is a problem. In the end, Anhe set his gaze on a place where the girl had exceptional talent. 10 minutes later, in front of a slightly old single apartment in Tokyo. He opened the door very awkwardly, and Anhe didn't even have time to flip-flop. He hurriedly walked into the room holding the girl in his arms. Hooked the door with her foot and closed it. Anhe didn't turn on the light, and relied on her memory to come all the way to the bed. Then she gently threw her arms down, and the mattress bounced up and down a few times due to a heavy object, but the girl still didn't wake up. Standing in front of the bed, Anhe took a few breaths and turned on the bedside light. The light dispersed the darkness and also presented the intoxicating figure on the bed before Anhe's eyes. She is as beautiful as a sleeping Snow White. With a sigh in her heart, Anhe bent down and took off the girl's shoes, revealing her delicate and white jade feet. The soles of the feet are very small, about 35 yards to the touch. Although they are wrapped in white socks, a slight pink flesh color can still be seen. Such beauty should be savored carefully in the mouth. Ignoring the sound in her mind, Anhe quickly grabbed the smooth ankle of the girl with a red face and stuffed her into the bed. After finishing all of this, he hurriedly left the room and returned to the living room, worried that he might become a beast if he stayed any longer. Speaking of which, what's going on with that woman? She hasn't woken up despite all the commotion. Has she been drugged? While muttering, Anhe went to the bathroom to take a shower. During this time, he was willing to reward himself once, but he eventually endured the cause of his death in his past life. Lying on the sofa covered in a thin blanket, Anhe quietly gazed at the ceiling with a pillow in his hand. At this moment, his thoughts are a bit confused. The fragrance of the sleeping girl next to the wall seemed to linger at the tip of his nose, and that aside, the narration in his mind kept urging him. Do you really want me to go in? Sorry, I don't get close to women. With this thought in mind, Anhe let go of his thoughts and quickly fell asleep holding onto a pair of women's uniform shoes. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. The Colors of the World. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. The Colors of the World. What color is the world? When the teacher asked this question, Yugong Shawa's answer was, suffocating black. As the eldest daughter of the Tokyo tycoon Yumiya family, it is reasonable to say that Yumiya Sawa's childhood should be full of happiness, but the fact is exactly the opposite. The mother's infidelity led to a significant change in the father's temperament, which was originally gentle. Long-term domestic violence, coupled with inner shame, ultimately led to Yugong's mother choosing to commit suicide when Yugong was 1 year old. Having no one to humiliate, the father eventually turned his gaze to the young Yugong. He always felt that Yugong was not his own child, but the examination results showed that they were both biological father and daughter, which forced him to fulfill his obligation to raise them. Despite this, my father still didn't want to see Rain Palace and instead formed a family with another woman to have a daughter. From childhood to adulthood, Yugong could only watch her half-sister being embraced and pampered by her father, while she was like an abandoned doll that no one would notice unless necessary. Loneliness and envy have become synonymous with Yugong Shawa's childhood. Over time, Yugong grew tired of going home and instead looked forward to school life. Only there can she avoid her father's cold eyes and play with her companions without any worries. However, all of this came to a complete end after her sister Yumiya Sayaka enrolled in school. Shizi is very beautiful, and she studies very well. Since childhood, her father has dressed her up like a little princess. With excellent grades, outstanding appearance, and generous hands, it is natural that yarn weaving has become a new figure in the school. However, Shizi disliked her sister very much because she felt that she always made her father angry. Therefore, with the enrollment of Shizi, various rumors about Shaowu began to fill the school, and those friends who were originally close to Shaowu also left one after another. Several years have passed, and Yumiya Satoru has always been patient. Today, a guy who claims to be Tanaka Jun's girlfriend slapped Satoru hard in front of the whole class, angrily accusing her of seducing Tanaka Jun. Despite not knowing who the other person's Tanaka Jun was, Shaowu still carried the title of Fox Spirit on his back. This is like the last straw that overwhelms the camel, and the school is no longer the paradise that Yugong Shiwu had hoped for. After school, Yugong Shaowu did not go home immediately as usual, but went alone to her mother's grave and sat there until late at night. Only in this way can she feel that she is not alone. Just when she realized she needed to go home, she realized helplessly that she didn't have any extra money to take the bus, and could only rest on the recliner at the platform to avoid the rain. Perhaps, as my father said, I was born a slut. The thought flashed through her mind. Yugong Shaowu took the sleeping pills she had taken for several years and lay on the lounge chair, slowly falling asleep, even though she knew the consequences of doing so. The next morning, the girl lying in bed had trembling eyelashes and then opened her eyes. When she realized that she was not at the bus stop last night, Yugong Shaowu did not panic, but instead looked around with her plain eyes. A strange room, a strange bed, and a faint masculine aura floating in the air. Did someone pick it up and take it home? Yugong Shaowu thought so and immediately lifted the blanket to examine herself. Although the clothes may look a bit messy, there are no traces of them being taken off, and there is no strange smell on the body. I moved my limbs slightly, without any abnormalities or discomfort. Didn't you touch me? Yugong Shaowu's eyes were indifferent as he stood up and looked around, but he couldn't find his shoes and had to get out of bed barefoot. Opening the bedroom door, Yugong Shiwu first scanned the living room and finally fixed her gaze on the sleeping figure lying on the sofa. The other person looked only 18, wearing a white shirt and black knee-length shorts. The thin blanket that should have been covering him collapsed to the ground, revealing most of the young man's body and the women's uniform shoes he was holding in his arms. Yugong Shaowu's face rarely showed a surprised expression, with a pair of big eyes constantly scanning back and forth on the shoe being held and her two exposed white and tender feet. Haven't any shoes been attractive yet? The absurd idea flashed through Yugong Shaowu's mind and he shook his head. Glancing out the window, the sky was already bright, and it was expected that the sun would also be shining in a few minutes. Based on the past sunrise time in Tokyo, it is estimated that it should be between 6:20 and 7:00. Yugong Shaowu does not have a mobile phone. Apart from the daily transportation expenses for going to and from school, the Yugong family does not give her any extra money, so Yugong Shaowu always determines her time through the sun or friends. The school starts at 7:40 and I am currently unsure of my location. In order not to be late, Yugong Shiwu decided to grab back her shoes first. Quietly approaching, Yugong Shaowu slowly crouched down and reached out to the heel of his uniform shoes to pull back. There was no twitching, on the contrary, the boy who was originally asleep slowly opened his eyes. He woke up. Yugong Shaowu thought of it and then met the pair of sleepy eyes full of confusion. Anhe, who was originally sleeping soundly, felt the object in her arms being twitched by someone. She opened her eyes in a daze, and a slender, snow-white arm immediately caught her eye. This is. Anhe didn't react for a moment and looked up along his arm. His gaze climbed over the proud peaks and quickly met a pair of indifferent eyes. Is it the girl from last night? After hesitating for 2 seconds, Anhe immediately wanted to get up, but with his movements, a black uniform shoe fell out of his arms first. Pada. The uniform shoes fell to the floor with a crisp sound, and then the room fell into a eerie silence. Anhe stared blankly at the uniform shoe under her feet, while the girl continued to gaze at him with those indifferent eyes. With such insight, this woman has already found a way to seek death. Fortunately, your 800 episodes of Conan in your past life were not in vain. In less than 2 seconds, you had already come up with a complete set of perfect crimes and sufficient alibis in your mind. The narrator in his mind didn't spit out any ivory, but it also brought Anhe back to his senses from his daze. After coughing twice, he quickly scratched his head and argued to the girl in front of him. "So, are you awake?" "Well, actually, I saw that these shoes were a bit dirty last night, so I took them to wash. But after washing, they dried too slowly, so I thought of holding them and covering them dry." "That's right. That's what I thought." Anhe's tone went from panic at the beginning, to a moment of confusion in the middle, to a moment of conviction in the end, to the point where he even believed the reasons he had said. However, Yugong Shawu did not respond to this. Instead, she silently picked up the shoe that was covered in warmth by Anhe and carefully examined it. After confirming that no suspicious white liquid was found, she directly put it on her foot. Then, she lifted her expressionless but unexpectedly cute face and looked at Anhe, whispering, "The other one." Her voice was very gentle, like a newborn kitten that would scratch the heart. "The other one." The girl's words left Anhe stunned for a moment. He noticed the other person's bare foot before realizing it. He quickly apologized and began searching on the sofa, but to no avail. Finally, he found it under the thin carpet on the ground. Handing the shoes to the girl, Anhe watched as she put on her shoes and spoke up. "Hello, my name is Anhe and Yushin." His words caused the girl's original shoe-hooking motion to pause, but soon returned to normal. After fully inserting her feet into the shoes, the girl stood up and looked at Anhe, bowing slightly. Rain Palace Mist. A very short paragraph, the girl quietly stared at Anhe after speaking. To be honest, being stared at so directly by a beautiful girl would make Anhe feel a bit uncomfortable in the past, but at this moment, he doesn't even care about these things. Because at the same time as the girl reported her name, a pale blue virtual screen appeared in front of Anhe out of thin air. Name: Yugong Shawu, current status: a lost girl who doesn't care about herself, current favorability: 13, not considered a disliked stranger, note. A liking level of less than or equal to 0.30 indicates hatred, a liking level of less than or equal to 0 indicates disgust, a liking level of less than or equal to 10 indicates indifference, a liking level of less than or equal to 20 indicates strangers who are not considered disliked, a liking level of less than or equal to 30 indicates acquaintance, a liking level of less than or equal to 40 indicates friend, a liking level of less than or equal to 50 indicates good friend, a liking level of less than or equal to 60 indicates confidant, a liking level of less than or equal to 70 indicates hidden affection, a liking level of less than or equal to 80 indicates liking, a liking level of less than or equal to 90 indicates love, a liking level of greater than or equal to 90 indicates infatuation, a liking level of greater than or equal to 100 indicates unwavering commitment until death. The current achievable outcome is as follows. A depraved girl who has lost hope for the world, meets the condition of not caring about the feeling of rain and mist in the palace, and forcibly occupies it. Reward, 1 million yen, the girl's longing for the reignited hope of the world, achieved under the condition of increasing her favorability to 70 or above. Reward, master level random 3 body techniques, note. As you avoided a bad ending last night, we now reward you with 20 basic skill points. Skill points can be allocated and added to any skill you currently possess. Stable daily with 1 chapter in the morning, 8 in the evening, and 6 in the evening. Looking forward to reading new books. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. First Kiss. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 First Kiss. After reading through the long string of fonts on the screen, Anhe's face became even more peculiar. After traveling for 18 years, he thought the narrator was his golden finger. Who would have thought that such a screen would suddenly appear now? So, is that dog voiceover purely to disgust me? Although he was so roast, Anhe became more and more angry when he looked at the light curtain in front of him. After all, this thing is really capable. I just got here and gave it 20 attribute points. Isn't it more direct than the narrator who only knows how to bark? Just as Anhe had just conceived this idea, the untimely narration in his mind rang out again. Looking at the light curtain in front of you, when you think of the majestic sound in your mind, you suddenly feel extremely proud. They all say that the young dragon and phoenix can be peaceful in the world. Now that you have both, the next step is to let the world feel the pain. Anhe felt that it was better not to pay attention to the narration, as he was afraid that his mind would also deteriorate after listening for a long time. Shaking his head, he threw away these miscellaneous thoughts, and Anhe's gaze towards the girl in front of him changed once again. If he had previously looked with pity and a hint of lust, then now all that remains is endless longing. This is not a girl from home, this is clearly a biological mother. Perhaps sensing Anhe's gaze, Yugong Shawu's eyes twitched slightly. After 2 seconds of silence, he suddenly reached out and grabbed the corner of his clothes, starting to lift them up and ask, "Do you want it?" "What do I need?" Anhe, who was looking forward to the future, was momentarily stunned upon hearing this. Then, he noticed the movements of Yugong Shawu's hand and realized something. He quickly waved his hand and shook his head. "No, no, no, it's not necessary." His words made the girl's movements pause, but she didn't let go. Instead, she stared at Anhe with her indifferent eyes and asked, "Why?" Speaking of this, she noticed Anhe's slightly frightened gaze and then thought of something, adding, "You can rest assured that this is my first time and I don't have any illness myself. I think you're sick." As Anhe cursed inwardly, he quickly stepped forward and pulled off the girl's half-lifted clothes, covering her fair and smooth belly. Anhe was not a serious person, but in his sight, from the moment the girl began to undress, the other person's favorability began to plummet. In just a few seconds, it dropped from the original 13 to 3 until Anhe stopped it before stopping the change. Combining the narrator's statement about the other party's identity as a girl from home, and the previously mentioned lost girl who doesn't care about herself, by the light curtain, Anhe quickly reflected on Yugong Shawu's thoughts. Repay the cost of staying overnight by oneself. It's a bit similar to the female protagonist Sao Ojihara in an anime that Anhe and he had watched in their past lives, but the latter was not redeemed in time. Even if they eventually met the male lead, she was already unclean at that time. Although Anhe claims not to be a saint, he will not watch a young girl in her prime fall and fall. Moreover, the other party's favorability is still declining at this time, which is related to Anhe's final reward. After all, those are 3 random master-level body spells. According to the evaluation of the light screen, Anhe's current highest painting skills are only worthy of reaching the master level, and as for others, they are just ordinary to the level of elites. It can be seen from this how precious the 3 master-level body techniques are. Yugong was naturally unclear about Anhe's thoughts, and even after being stopped, she didn't continue to undress. Instead, she held on to the hem of her clothes and stared at Anhe silently. Her eyes are very beautiful, the most beautiful among all the girls Anhe has ever seen. The only downside is that she lacks a bit of energy and looks like a dead lake. Being stared at by such beautiful eyes, Anhe felt somewhat uneasy. Just as he was about to inquire about the girl's situation, the other party suddenly spoke up. "Are you testosterone?" A question sentence, but it was asked in a positive tone by Yugong Shawu. Anhe was taken aback by the words, and his face turned black instantly after realizing it. At the same time, the narration in his mind also appeared, which was not a big deal. "She's questioning you, the time traveler, she's questioning your sexual orientation. Can you bear it? Are you really a male ketone? Do you need me to switch to Tom Hiddleston's voice next time?" Note: Tom Hiddleston, played by Marvel Rocky, is known as the world's sexiest male voice. What are you barking at in the dog? After a useless voiceover, and he took a deep breath and then looked at Yugong Shawu, who met his gaze without hesitation, with a pair of indifferent eyes staring at him. 1 second, 2 seconds. The next moment, Anhe suddenly grabbed Rain Palace's hand and pulled it into his arms. The latter's expression froze, and before she could react, Anhe leaned in. The moist and soft touch came, and Anhe could clearly feel the stiffness of Yugong's body. No matter how indifferent your face is, will you still be afraid inside? With this thought in her heart, Anhe's gaze as she gazes at Yugong Shawuzi also carries a hint of mockery. However, just as he was about to let go of the Rain Palace veil, the latter suddenly reached out and hooked his neck, pressing tightly against him. In an instant, Anhe's pupils dilated and a refreshing fragrance came from his mouth. The next second, Anhe only felt his body shake and he was thrown down onto the sofa by Yugong. Puff, the young sofa bears the weight it shouldn't bear at its age, and the two figures bounced up and down a few times due to the material of the sofa. But from beginning to end, Rain Palace did not let go, and instead took the opportunity to ride on Anhe in an attempt to dominate. Feeling the clumsy teasing of the other party, Anhe gradually began to respond. For a long time, the two parted ways. Anhe took the opportunity to exhale heavily, his eyes curved into crescents, and he smiled as he looked at the beautiful face of Yugong Shawu, who was close by. At this moment, the latter no longer had the cold and indifferent appearance he had before. He pressed his hands against Anhe's chest and propped himself up. His pretty face turned red, his eyes blurred, and he was as charming as a fairy returning to the mortal world, greedily breathing in fresh air. Seeing this scene, and he couldn't help but sigh, I thought you really wouldn't have any other expressions. The latter was taken aback at the words, and his expression visibly calmed down. However, his cheeks and ears were still pink, and his eyes, which were being watched by Anhe, no longer dared to look at him. Do you want to do it? This is the second time Yugong has asked this question today, with a slight tremble in his tone. At the same time, Anhe clearly felt that the other party's legs, which were gripping his waist and abdomen, were slightly heavier than before. Obviously, this time, Yugong Shawu was also very nervous when she said this sentence again. Upon seeing this, Anhe shook his head and then reached out to embrace him. The latter, without resistance, gently rested his head on Anhe's shoulder. The two of them lay quietly on the sofa for a while, and only spoke again when their breathing had calmed down. Can you tell me why you ran away from home? Yugong Shawu did not answer, and Anhe also anticipated this. He was not in a hurry, but shifted the topic and asked, what happened to you last night? Most people shouldn't fall asleep so heavily. Upon hearing his words, Yugong did not remain silent this time but explained softly, because my sleep is poor, I usually take some sleeping pills before going to bed. So you also had it last night. Anhe Yusheng's face was full of shock, and he directly propped up Yugong Shawu's body. He frowned at the other person's eyes and asked, are you not afraid of being picked up by bad people? Upon hearing this, Yugong Shawu pursed her lips without answering, but turned her head and did not look at Anhe again. Upon seeing this, and he remained silent for 2 seconds without further questioning. He suddenly thought of the previous evaluation of the Rain Palace missed by the light curtain. A confused girl who doesn't care about herself at all obviously, at the moment when the other party decided to take medicine and sleep on the late-night platform, they had already prepared themselves for being violated. Anhe felt a bit uneasy for a moment. After a moment of silence, Rain Palace spoke again. I should go to school now. The voice regained its previous calm and indifference. Upon hearing this, Anhe was taken aback and realized that the other person was also a high school student about his own age. After 2 seconds of silence, he still let go of his hand. As the girl stood up from her own body, Anhe suddenly asked while the other party was tidying up, are you going home today? I mean you're home. The girl's movements paused noticeably, then accelerated a bit. After finishing, she didn't look at Anhe's face and turned to walk towards the entrance. Upon seeing this, and he spoke again, there is a key under the doorstep mat. If you still don't plan to go home at night, please take it away. My door will always be open for you, and the price is just a kiss like before. Yugong Shawu did not respond. With a muffled bang, the door was closed, leaving only Anhe and the faint fragrance of a young girl in the air once again. Name: Yugong Shawu, current status: Little Match Girl. Note: a ray of light was found in the darkness, but she dared not touch it because she was afraid that the light would disappear as she approached. Current favorability: 37, friend, note. Perhaps you can try to enter her heart. This is the last state of Rain Palace mist that Anhe saw, and it is also the reason why he left with peace of mind. If nothing unexpected happens, she shouldn't be as indifferent to her body as before. With this thought in mind, Anhe stood up and walked outside the door, lifting the carpet. It's as empty as ever. Seeing this, Anhe couldn't help but smile on his face. Coincidentally, a bell rang in the room, and upon returning to the room, Anhe found his flip phone in the crevice of the sofa. He picked it up and found that he had set his own wake-up alarm. I have to go to school again. With a sigh, Anhe put down his phone, then picked up his school uniform and went to the bathroom to wash his teeth. However, while brushing his teeth, Anhe always remembered the face of Yugong Shawu. Let's go take a look after school. I remember she was wearing the school uniform of Baiziyuan. Anhe is worried that if Yugong Shawu doesn't know the way, or if he gets caught by some other strange uncle. As for the north courtyard he mentioned, it is not far from the Munan Middle School where he is located, and it only takes less than 10 minutes to walk there. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Black Lie Fuzi. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Black Lie Fuzi. After a simple breakfast, Anhe hurried out of the house before 7:20. His apartment was a single-story building, so as soon as he opened the door, he could see the bustling Tokyo city. A day full of dreams. Thinking of the previous kiss, Anhe couldn't help but sigh, then tightened his scarf around his neck and turned to close the door. However, just as he was about to leave, the sound of the door opening came from beside him. Looking sideways, a beautiful woman wearing a white shirt and a black buttock skirt was walking out of the next door carrying a brown cloth bag. Amazing figure. Looking at the beauty in front of you, your heart couldn't help but skip a beat. Although you haven't seen her a few times, you still remember her identity as a surviving wife. A spirit called Wei Wu's legacy is quietly breeding. If you catch her handle, perhaps you can. Ignoring the narration in Chao's mind, and he glanced at the other person's full chest and round thighs wrapped in black silk without leaving a trace, and then greeted them with a sunny smile on his face. Good morning, Mrs. Black Lie. Are you going to work now? Ah. Black Lie Fuzi, who had just closed the door, was startled by the sudden sound and his body trembled. Later, he noticed Anhe and Yusheng standing beside him. When he saw that it was the new neighbor who had just moved next door last week, although he couldn't hide his fatigue, he still smiled. It's Anhe. I was just planning to go out to work. Speaking of this, she looked up and down again at Anhe and saw him wearing a slightly familiar black suit-style uniform. After careful consideration for a moment, she couldn't help but be surprised and said, Is Anhe a student of Munan? Does Mrs. Black know our school? Anhe and Yusheng were somewhat surprised. In his memory, the child of the lady in front of him was still a third-grade elementary school girl, so it should not have any intersection with high school. Seeing Anhe's surprised expression, Black Lie Fuzi rolled his long linen hair tied behind him and explained with a light smile, I work around there. Oh, is that so? Anhe showed a sudden realization, but his gaze intentionally or unintentionally turned to the bundle of long hair that Black Lie Fuzi had pulled up to his chest. What a dangerous hairstyle, madam, danger. Your eyes lit up, and a brilliant plan suddenly appeared. Since the other party cares so much about their daughter, why not use it as a threat? At that time, women will definitely use it as a deterrent. Lying trough. You're really a criminal, can you say that? Anhe was deeply shocked in his heart, but looking at the tightly closed door behind Highlight Fuzi, he couldn't help but wonder and ask, shouldn't Sakurai go to school? He swore to heaven that this question was definitely not a thought, it was just a simple curiosity. Speaking of his daughter, Black Life Fuzi's previously tired face gradually faded, and the corners of his mouth unconsciously curled up, revealing a smile and explaining, she seems to love going to school very much, so she had breakfast early in the morning and ran to school. Is Sakari sauce so powerful? Anhe and Yusheng were once again surprised. After all, in his opinion, the fact that a third-grade child could actively attend school was even more shocking than the first time he saw teacher Lu Zixin's trisomy. Seeing his expression, the Black Life Fuzi also showed a pleased smile, and then chatted with Anhe for a few more words. It was not until early that he proposed to go together. Thinking that the other party was working near their own school, Anhe and Xian agreed. After all, it was boring all the way, and having someone to talk to was also good. However, Anhe's idea was completely dispelled after getting on the tram. On the crowded tram, as the vehicles moved, Anhe felt the soft touch occasionally coming from his back, and his heart was filled with pain. It was the peak period for work and school, and the carriage was almost full of people. Anhe and Highlight Fuzi also had a hard time squeezing into a corner position after getting on the train. In the spirit of gentlemanly demeanor, and he proposed to let Black Life Fuzi stand behind him and stick to the wall, so as to avoid physical contact with others again. After all, Tokyo's idiots are famous. For this point, the Black Life Fuzi was naturally aware, so he agreed without any hesitation. However, it wasn't until the tram really started that the two realized an awkward situation. Because it is in a corner position, there are no handrails on the top of the tram, which leads to Anhe's body inevitably shaking due to unstable center of gravity after the tram is moving. It's okay to move left and right, and both sides of Anhe are male. Even if they lean up, the other person won't say much, but as they sway back and forth, Anhe can always feel a soft touch like warm tofu on his back. Don't worry, Anhe knows what this is. Although feeling very guilty, Anhe couldn't help but sigh in his heart. So big, so soft, so comfortable, squeak. Just as he was thinking about it, the tram arrived at the station. As the car door opened, and he, who was 177 meters tall, saw a young white-collar worker dressed in black framed glasses desperately pushing towards the entrance of the crowd. Obviously, he was the passenger who got off at this station. However, as soon as he finally squeezed to the door and had not had time to take a step, more people rushed into the carriage from the platform in a frenzy. The young man who finally squeezed to the door was pushed back into the carriage by the crowd. Even though he kept shouting, he still couldn't change the fact that the tram door was slowly closing. In the end, he had to desperately reach out and try to grab the car door, but to no avail. What a miserable man! Anhe suppressed his smile and silently mourned for the other person for 3 seconds, but soon his expression froze. Due to the influx of many people at this station just now, the already crowded carriages are now even more crowded. And as a result, Anhe had to move back again, which made his entire body lean against Highlight Fuzi. The two bodies were completely pressed against each other, but at this moment, the tram was moving, accompanied by a wave of shaking. Anhe could clearly feel that the grandeur of Highlight Fuzi was completely transformed by his pressure. At the same time, an extremely gentle whimper also reached Anhe's ears. The voice was not loud, but Anhe listened attentively, coming from the mouth of the black rascal Fuzi behind him. It seemed that he also realized that the sound he had just made was inappropriate. Black Life Fuzi's pretty face turned red and he quickly reached out to press against Anhe's back in order to relieve the burden on his chest. However, the results were minimal. 5 minutes later. Another gentle whimper sounded, attracting the attention of many people centered around Anhe, including envy and disgust. Anhe is also speechless about this. That. The voice of Hei Lai Fuzi suddenly came, and upon hearing it, and he turned his head and saw Hei Lai Fuzi approaching his face. He whispered, "Why don't you turn around, Anhe Jun? That way, you can still use your hands to press against the wall of the car, so you won't be as unstable as you are now." Her voice became quieter and quieter, but Anhe couldn't help but brighten up after listening. This is actually a solution. As soon as he thought of it, Anhe whispered, "I'm sorry then." Then, he pushed aside the people around him and quickly turned around, supporting the car wall with both hands in a wall-thumping manner, facing the Black Lai Fuzi before they rushed forward again. The crowd that had just been squeezed out surged back, and Anhe's body couldn't help but get closer to Hei Lai Fuzi. Although they still stick together, fortunately they haven't changed shape anymore. Seeing this, Anhe breathed a sigh of relief and immediately looked at Hei Lai Fuzi. At this moment, the latter was pursing his lips and turning his head to look out of the window. His pretty face and ears were blushing with embarrassment, so much so that Anhe could feel the other person's incredibly fast heartbeat through the touch of his chest. It's a pity not to do something about such a close distance, provided that you keep the person in front of you quiet. However, you had planned for this. After all, the 2 white socks left by the morning rain palace mist are still in your pocket. Today's first update. Send it on the second night, end of this chapter. Chapter 5. New Class Teacher. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. New Class Teacher. The Munan Middle School wherein he is located is not too far from his rented place, and it only takes 3 stops by tram to reach. However, it was a difficult and peaceful journey. Little pervert. He spat inwardly, and the Black Lai Fuzi didn't say much. He silently moved the cloth bag that was originally in his hand to his body and lifted it up, using it to block between Xiaoan and her. Do you want to block this little thing? You couldn't help but sneer in your heart, sighing that the woman in front of you has limited knowledge. Coincidentally, no one is paying attention at this moment, so you can rest assured to pull open your panties. Ignoring the twisted remarks of the dog narrator in his mind, Anhe leaned forward and silently memorized the 3-character classic in his heart. Time slowly passed in this awkward and ambiguous atmosphere, and Anhe Yusheng and Hei Lai Fuzi did not look at each other in tacit agreement, but their breathing became noticeably chaotic. Finally, with the sound of the Munan Middle School station has arrived, the tram slowly stopped. Due to the presence of 2 high schools and several commercial streets nearby, there are quite a few people getting off at this station, including An and 2 others. Silently getting off the car, before An and Yusheng could say anything, Black Lai Fuzi, who was following him, spoke up first. Sorry, Anhe Jun. I'm almost late for work, so I won't talk to you for now. See you next time. After speaking, Hei Lai Fuzi didn't wait for Anhe to reply. She lowered her head and walked quickly in one direction. However, after only a few steps, she suddenly turned around and walked back. As she passed by Anhe, even though her pretty face turned red with embarrassment, she still explained in a low voice, I went the wrong way. Watching the Black Lai Fuzi walk away, Anhe's second brother finally lowered his proud head. Fortunately, when he got off the car, he took off his scarf and stood in front of him, so that no one else noticed anything unusual. However, Anhe watched as Black Lai Fuzi's back gradually faded away, his eyes becoming increasingly strange. I don't know if it's an illusion, but he always feels that the black thread between the legs of Hei Lai Fuzi has a slight reflection under the sunlight. Is that Anhe Jun? The sudden female voice beside her shattered Anhe's thoughts. Turning her head, she saw a JK girl with wheat skin, short hair that was straight to the ears, and dressed in a uniform from Munan Middle School. After a brief thought, Anhe remembered each other's identity and smiled as she spoke. Are you a classmate from Beidao? Have you just arrived? Upon hearing Anhe Yusheng's words, the girl's face clearly flashed with joy. It was obvious that she was very happy about Anhe being able to call her name, and she even smiled and said, I thought Anhe Jun wouldn't remember my name. As she spoke, the girl shyly lowered her head, turned her back to her hands, and drew circles on the ground with her toes. How could that be? It's hard not to notice a cute girl like Keiko Kitajima. And then Yushin pretended to speak in surprise. Upon hearing his words, Keiko Kitajima, who had originally lowered her head, burst out laughing with a thud. She then approached and patted An and Yushin on the shoulder, saying angrily, "I hate you, Yushin-jun. You would make people shy if you said that." As if she hadn't noticed at all that her nickname for An and Yushin had changed from a previously unfamiliar surname to an intimate one, Keiko Kitajima took out her phone and looked at it after saying these words. When it was time for class, she exclaimed in surprise. "No problem, we're late. Yushin-jun, hurry up and leave. I heard that the homeroom teacher who transferred today is a very fierce woman." After speaking, Keiko Kitajima didn't wait for An and Yushin to reply before he grabbed his hand and ran towards the school. Running all the way, feeling the soft touch from the palm of her hand, An and Yushin rarely had any unusual emotions. Because at the first sight of Keiko Kitajima, An and Yushin recognized the true face of the girl in front of them through the narration. Although the other side tried to hide it, Yu Huon Wulong recognized the identity of the other side's 80 people at a glance, which is also worthy of touching you. You are sneering in your heart, but your face is still silent. After all, the person who delivered the door is not in vain. Although the other side has already been a bus, but can't bear to live well with many sisters. I believe you just need to hint that tonight will be a sleepless night. Say goodbye, I'm afraid of getting sick. Anhe rolled his eyes calmly. Although he is a bit lecherous and a bit perverted, he is not at all greedy, otherwise he wouldn't still be alone until now. Just as they were thinking, the two of them arrived at the gate of a school and were scolded after showing their student ID to the security guard before successfully entering the school. Just as she left the guard room, Keiko Kitajima couldn't help but complain softly. "You're so verbose, didn't you just be a few minutes late? As for that. Last time you touched me." Halfway through the conversation, she suddenly remembered that An and Yushin were beside her, and she quickly changed her mind. "I'm sorry, Anhe-jin. It's me who caused you trouble. Due to some personal reasons, I offended the gatekeeper uncle. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made things difficult for us like he did today. Is this exposing the chicken feet?" Anhe Yushin spoke in agreement, but in his heart, he had already labeled Kitajima Huizi as a tea master. As for the personal reasons mentioned by the other party, Anhe is not interested in delving deeper. After a few more minutes, the two finally arrived at the entrance of Class B, a high school senior wherein he was located. The classroom door was tightly closed, and a strange and stern female voice could be faintly heard inside. Anhe guessed that this should be the newly transferred homeroom teacher mentioned by Keiko Kitajima. The two stood at the door, tidying up their slightly disheveled clothes due to running, and then Keiko Kitajima knocked on the door. The sound in the classroom suddenly stopped and then rang out again. "Come in." The voice was very cold. Upon hearing this, Keiko Kitajima blinked at An and Yushin, and a nervous and pitiful expression suddenly appeared on her face as she pushed open the door. As soon as the door opened, Keiko Kitajima didn't even see the teacher on the podium clearly before bowing down and apologizing. "Sorry teacher, my classmates An and Yushin were late because we encountered a lost child on the way. Are women so skilled at telling lies?" Although Anhe was surprised in his heart, his body bowed and apologized without any hesitation. After all, if he could salvage his image in the eyes of the new class teacher with just a few words, it would be a huge profit for him. "Is that right? Then go in and sit down." The teacher was unexpectedly easy to speak, and upon seeing this, and the two quickly thanked each other before getting up and walking towards their respective positions. It wasn't until the two of them sat down on the podium that the female teacher in a black uniform began to move. She first wrote the 4 words, Shigeru Ito, on the blackboard with chalk, then turned around and propped up the desk with her hands, saying word by word to the students below. "My name is Shigeru Ito, and I will be your homeroom teacher for the next year. As you can see, I am an old woman who is almost 30 years old and still single, so my temper may be a bit bad. Speaking of which, Shigeru Ito's sharp and beautiful eyes glanced at Yasuhiro, who was sitting at the second-to-last table in the fourth row, and Keiko Kitajima, who was not far away, continued to speak. So, I hope that in the future, no one in the class will be late, and no one will attempt to deceive me with inferior lies, understand? Her words fell, as if an invisible pressure spread from around her, and the whole class fell into a moment of silence. Besides someone's mind. While looking at this domineering woman, you can't help but be amazed. Conquering is often the most enjoyable thing for men, and the woman in front of you gives you a great desire to conquer. In less than 2 seconds, you have already imagined the scene of the other person crying and begging for mercy under your pressure. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. The state of the Rain Palace Mist is very bad. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. The state of the Rain Palace Mist is very bad. Japanese high school students only need to attend 6 classes a day, which are 4 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. After the 2 classes in the afternoon, it was already 2:50 p.m. After class, the on-duty students from each class would clean up. After the cleaning is completed, it is the activity time for various departments and clubs, and of course, some people may choose to leave school directly. Anhe Yusheng is one of the members who left the school. Due to his recent transfer, his duty has been arranged for the next week. As for the club activities, Anhe has not made any plans yet. After all, he has only recently transferred to Tokyo, and the top priority is still to make money as his primary goal. First, go to Baiziyuan to see the situation of Yugong Shawu, and then go to the nearby commercial street to find a job. With this in mind, Anhe packed all the homework assigned by the teacher today into his backpack and then picked it up, intending to walk towards the classroom door. Previously, Anhe didn't bring his backpack because he finished his homework at school. Noticing his movements, Keiko Kitajima, who was originally stretching lazily, paused slightly, as if pondering for a moment. Then, with a familiar and curious tone, she exclaimed, "Are you coming home so early today?" Her voice was not loud, but the students sitting around her all listened attentively and curiously turned their heads to look at her. Their eyes kept scanning back and forth between Anhe and Yusheng, as well as Keiko Kitajima. Seeing this scene, Anhe's original plan of pretending not to have heard of it also fell through. He had to look at the latter helplessly and smile. "Yes, I just moved to Tokyo recently, and there are still many things to deal with at home, so I've been back very early these days." "So, does Yusheng-jun need my help?" Keiko Kitajima didn't intend to give up the opportunity to communicate with Anhe and Yusheng just like this. After she finished speaking, she seemed to be worried about Anhe and Yusheng's refusal. She reached out and placed her hand on the upper arm of her right hand, making a bright muscle movement and showing a white-toothed smile, saying, "Don't be fooled by my small stature, but in fact, I am very capable." Upon hearing the girl's words, you couldn't help but look at her, her plain chest, wheat-colored short legs exposed under her pleated skirt, and the 2 pointed tiger teeth at the corner of her mouth. Tiger teeth. Suddenly, a bold idea emerged in your heart. Feeling surprised by the narrator's imagination, Anhe withdrew his gaze from looking at the girl's 2 tiger teeth, and a sincere smile appeared on his face, waving his hand and politely refusing, "Don't trouble your classmates from Beidou. There are other people in my family, so it's not convenient to take someone home, but I understand your kindness." "Is that so?" Upon hearing Anhe and Yusheng's words, Keiko Kitajima's excited expression on her face instantly became disheartened, but she forced out a forced smile and said, "Be careful all the way, Yusheng-jun. See you tomorrow." "See you tomorrow." And then Yusheng finished speaking and walked straight towards the classroom door. When he left the classroom, Keiko Kitajima, who was originally straight, collapsed on the desk like she had lost her soul. The girls who had previously noticed the situation here saw Anhe leave and immediately crowded around Keiko Kitajima to start gossiping. Most of the topics revolve around Anhe and Keiko Kitajima. Regarding this, although Keiko Kitajima, who was lying on the table, had an impatient expression on her face and kept saying things like, "No, we are all friends, you misunderstood," her heart had already blossomed with joy. After all, what she most enjoyed was the feeling of being noticed. On the other side, for everything that happened in the classroom, and he was not clear about it. After leaving the school gate, he ran all the way to the entrance of the neighboring Baiziyuan Middle School. Although it has been confirmed in the morning that Yugong Shao's favorability has reached 37, and the other party has also taken the key, for safety reasons, Anhe still plans to come and see the situation. Time passed slowly, and due to Anhe's early arrival, there were not many students coming out of the North Campus. A few scattered ones also rushed by, indicating that these people were either busy with family matters or poor people like Anhe, busy working and making money. Decades later, just as Anhe had the idea to leave first, a figure wearing an orange low-cut sweater vest and a long string of blue light curtains appeared in his field of vision. Name: Yugong Shao, current state: cold, hungry, painful, low fever, mental state hovering on the brink of collapse, current favorability. 38, friend, note. She urgently needs your help. What the hell is this bunch of negative buffs? Anhe was filled with surprise in his heart. After all, seeing the other person in the morning was still good. After only a while of not seeing each other, he became like this and the other person's favorability inexplicably increased. Is it difficult? Is this school still a dragon's pond and tiger's den? Such thoughts flashed in his heart, and Anhe didn't care about the students from the North Academy around him. He quickly ran towards the Yugong Shao. Approaching the Rain Palace mist, Anhe realized that the other party was actually wet all over, and their walking posture was also somewhat strange, indicating that their feet were injured. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of her. Seeing this, Yugong Shao, who had been walking with a heavy head, instinctively wanted to move aside. However, before she could move, she felt something extra on her neck. Fluffy and very warm. Yugong Shao looked up in confusion and instantly met a pair of caring eyes. "Are you okay?" The male voice that I only heard in the morning echoed in my ears, like an iron pickaxe, shattering the silent Hubo ice surface and also shattering the gray shop window that suppressed the Rain Palace mist all day long. The gentle breeze woke the girl up from her daze. When she realized it, Yugong Shao's eyes turned slightly red and she quickly sniffled. She turned her head and didn't look at An and Yusheng again, but she still responded softly. "I'm fine. Are you okay if you're all wet?" Anhe's tone was slightly angry, and his gaze lingered for a moment on the feet of Yugong Shao, who was wearing a black uniform and leather shoes. He then turned his back to Yugong Shao, bent down, and said, "I'll carry you on my back. I saw you walking and swaying. Did your foot hurt?" Upon hearing the latter half of the sentence, Yugong Shao, who had originally planned to refuse, pursed her lips, remained silent for a moment, and finally gave a gentle response. She then lay down on Anhe's back. Their actions naturally caught the attention of other nearby students, and many even boldly extended their hands to point at them. Regarding this, An and Quan did not see it, and the Rain Palace mist lying on his back, like an ostrich lying on sand, buried its head on An and Quan's back in an attempt to escape reality. After leaving the school gate, Anhe did not choose to go home directly. The previous light curtain not only indicated cold and pain, but also hunger and weakness. Therefore, Anhe decided to bring Yugong Shao to the nearest store to buy a set of clothes and then have some food. Looking around, Anhe finally walked towards a commercial street. On the other side, outside a coffee shop, a woman dressed in black and white maid attire, with a cat ear headband and a black tail hanging from her skirt, had just bent down and said sweet words to a departing guest, "Master, take your time, I look forward to you coming home." The next moment, she felt an extra figure appear in front of her. How come there are still guests? I have to go pick up my daughter. Black Lai Fuzi complained in his heart, but a sweet smile quickly appeared on his face as he coquettishly called out, "Master, welcome home," while looking up at the incoming person. However, when she saw the person in front of her clearly, her expression instantly froze. Underneath her long, slightly curly black hair were a pair of beautiful peach blossom eyes, paired with the other person's fair and handsome face and the smile that often hung at the corners of her mouth. It always gave a warm sunny feeling. But at this moment, the owner of these peach blossom eyes was staring at him in surprise, with an expression as if realizing that his childhood friend still had a fetish for women's clothing. Facing those eyes, time seemed to pause for a moment. Thinking back to the scenes in the morning tram, Black Lai Fuzi's pretty face turned red visible to the naked eye, until it reached the base of his ears. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Black Lai." The young man spoke first, his voice full of surprise, clearly surprised to see Black Lai Fuzi here. Upon hearing this, the black rascal blushed a little more and lowered his head in great shame. He stuttered back, "Good afternoon, Anhe. Don't you need to join the club?" First update, end of this chapter. Chapter 7. The Secret of Black Lai Shizi. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. The Secret of Black Lai Shizi. Because I have just transferred to Munin Middle School, I have no plans to join the club at the moment. Anhe Yusheng responded with his mouth, but his gaze occasionally turned towards Hai Lai Fuzi's head. There, a pale pink virtual light screen that only Anhe could see was constantly flickering with handwriting. Name: Hai Lai Fuzi, current status: a shy wife whose secret has been discovered. Note: January 17th of the secret is currently discovered, current favorability 47, good friends. The current achievable outcome is as follows. Exclusive person. Achieving condition. Discovering all hidden secrets of the other party and engaging in relationships with a liking level below 70. Reward. Randomly 3 master-level vocal skills, destined but not destined. Achieving condition. Black Lai Fuzi's favorability is above 90 and then completely disappears from his view. Reward. Randomly 3 master-level driving skills, stranger. Achieving condition. Favorite rating below 0. Reward. 100,000 yen, taboos of immoral love. Achieving conditions. Helping the other party repay all debts and having a liking level of 70 or above and engaging in sexual activity. Reward. Doubling physical fitness. After reading all the information, Anhe calmly withdrew his gaze. With the experience of Yugong Shawu ahead, he didn't panic this time, but the 4 endings on the screen inevitably made Anhe feel a bit uneasy. His mother love, Anhe always felt that the light curtain was logged in by a dog. Although Mrs. Black's husband is gone, she is currently single, beautiful, and has a gentle personality. Thinking of Anhe suddenly falling into silence, because he realized that after so careful consideration, Mrs. Black Lai seemed to be also very good. Taking a deep breath, Anhe temporarily let go of these thoughts and then looked at Hai Lai Fuzi. The latter had already calmed down at this moment, although his face was still flushed. At least he could lift his head and look at Anhe. At this moment, she noticed that Anhe was still carrying someone on his back. She turned her head and looked carefully. When she saw that it was a wet young girl, she was surprised and covered her mouth, exclaiming in surprise. Anhe, who is she? Upon hearing her words, Anhe turned around and glanced at Yugong Shawu, who had his chin resting on his shoulder, his cheeks turning red and his eyes hazy. He sighed helplessly and explained, "This is my cousin. She accidentally fell into the water before and now she has a cold, so I plan to take her to change into dry clothes, take some food, and then prescribe some medicine. That's it." Upon hearing this, Black Lai Fuzi showed a clear expression, and the blush on his face gradually faded before he frowned and said, "But Anhe, this is a snack street, and there are no clothes sellers nearby." After speaking, her gaze lingered for a moment on the rosy pretty face of Yugong Shawu. Finally, as if she had made up her mind, she suddenly took Anhe's hand and walked towards the coffee shop, saying, "Alright, Anhe-jin. I have 2 clothes that I changed out in the morning. If your sister doesn't mind, you can let her wear them first." "Hey, wouldn't this be too troublesome for Madame Black Lie?" Anhe Yusheng was somewhat surprised, but he did not refuse the good intentions of the Black Lie to pacify his son. After all, the Yugong Shawu behind him was not in a good state at the moment. If he hadn't encountered the black rascal Fuzi, Anhe even planned to take off his clothes and give the other person a change. Entering the CAFA, Hailai Fuzi first made Anhe and the 2 of them wait for a moment. He found an elderly woman dressed as a maid and said a few words. After listening, the latter glanced at Chaoan and Yugong Shawu behind him, then nodded. Hailai Shizi then ran back and led Anhe and the 2 towards the back hall of the CAFA. Passing through the hall, the 3 of them quickly arrived at a tightly closed door in the back hall. Black Lie Fuzi first knocked on the door, confirming that there was no sound inside before pushing it open and explaining to Anhe on the side. "Please come in, this is our changing room, and my clothes are also inside." Upon hearing her words, Anhe didn't show any affectation and walked directly in carrying the Rain Palace veil mist. Hailai Fuzi followed closely behind and even locked the door after entering the changing room. The dressing room is enclosed as a whole, without windows, and the space is not very large. Apart from a row of metal storage cabinets, 2 wooden benches are placed. As soon as you enter the locker room, all kinds of women's perfumes smell immediately. Anhe shrugged his nose slightly uncomfortable, and then, together with the rushing Black Lie Fuzi, poured the Rain Palace gauze onto the bench. The latter seemed to have a fever, causing her pretty face to turn red and her eyes to be blurred. Her whole body was like soft mud, unable to exert any force. However, despite this, her hand still tightly grasped the corner of Anhe Yusheng's clothes. Upon seeing this, Anhe and Hailai Fuzi exchanged a glance, with the latter taking the lead in speaking. "Wait a moment, I'll get my clothes." As he spoke, Black Lie Fuzi took out a key from the pocket of the maid's apron and came to the storage cabinet. Anhe Shixiang withdrew his gaze, but the narration in his mind suddenly rang out. The storage cabinet is the first on the left in the 3rd row from top to bottom, and there are unexpected surprises inside. Raising an eyebrow, Anhe instinctively turned his head to look at the storage box mentioned by the narrator. The storage cabinet is closed, but there is a photo posted on the surface of the cabinet door. The female owner in the photo looks around 30 years old, not as beautiful but more mature as the black rascal Fuzi. What could be unexpected in such a big place? It can't be a special toy, can it? Sorry for being hasty, you are not an ordinary person. What does it mean? Anhe wanted to see again, but when he saw that the Black Lie Fuzi had already finished taking his things, he quickly withdrew his gaze. In no time, she returned to Anhe with a set of OL uniforms, which was the one she was wearing in the morning. Upon seeing this, Anhe also stood up and said, "Madam Black Lie, could you please help Shawu change her clothes?" Upon hearing this, the black rascal caressed his face with a gentle smile and lightly rubbed his forehead against the mist of Yugong's veil with the back of his hand, saying softly, "It's okay. I'll trouble you, I'll wait outside." Seeing her promise, Anhe Yusheng wanted to leave, but before he could make any movement, a slender hand grabbed his pants leg first. "Don't leave." A soft and hoarse female voice emanated from the mouth of Yugong's gauze mist, and the room fell into silence. This. Anhe felt a bit embarrassed for a moment and bent down to try to break Yugong Shawu's hand, but no matter how hard he tried, Yugong Shawu wouldn't let go. Seeing this, the black rascal beside him smiled and said, "You two have a really good relationship." After speaking, she looked at Yugong Shawu's small hand tightly gripping Anhe's pants, and after a moment of silence, she suggested, "Why don't Anhe turn his back?" Upon hearing her words, Anhe hesitated for a moment and nodded. "It's also okay." Speaking, Anhe turned around and turned his back to the two of them. As he turned around, Black Lie Fuzi also bent down and began to slowly take off the clothes of Rain Palace gauze. 1 second, 2 seconds, the rustling sound of undressing rang out, and Anhe, with his back facing each other, naturally had no choice but to look at the rows of storage cabinets in front of him, enjoying the beautiful scenery behind him. Just quickly, his gaze was drawn to a half-open cabinet door. Remember, this seems to be the cabinet door that Mrs. Black Lie just opened. Anhe thought to himself and couldn't help but look into the cabinet. The things in the cabinet are very miscellaneous, including clothes that need to be changed normally, cosmetics commonly used by women, and a remote control. It looks like a car key, but it is slightly smaller than a regular car key, with only 2 buttons. And Anhe can confirm that Lie Fuzi doesn't have a car, otherwise he wouldn't have chosen to squeeze the tram like him in the morning. Just as I was thinking about it, a burst of mobile phone ringtones accompanied by vibrations suddenly rang from the cabinet, and the remote control that was originally placed on the outermost side was also shaken by this sudden vibration, causing it to fall from the storage cabinet. Fortunately, Anhe quickly reached out and grabbed the remote control, which prevented it from falling to the ground. However, as a result, several buttons on the remote control were pressed down by Anhe's fingers. Detected Black Lie Fuzi's new secret, secrets discovered February 17, what secret? Anhe was a bit confused by the sudden light curtain that appeared in front of him, but before he could figure out the situation, the next moment, a sudden cry of surprise from the Black Lie Fuzi came from behind its late, I plead guilty, end of this chapter. Chapter 8. Piano. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Piano. It is said that a person will experience 3 deaths in their life, namely, death, funeral, and forgetting. However, just now, Lie Fuzi truly experienced the 4th type of death. Social death. On the other side, in the changing room. Due to the sudden departure of Lie Fuzi, the task of dressing Yugong with gauze and mist can only be completed by Anhe. Fortunately, Black Lie had already changed the gauze mist clothes before Fuzi, and the rest only needed to be buttoned. But even so, it still took Anhe a lot of effort. It was really that Yugong Shao's chest was too strong, to the point where Anhe couldn't fasten it even after several consecutive attempts. Fortunately, in the end, Anhe successfully held it down. Coincidentally, the door was pushed open and Black Lie Fuzi walked in with a red face. Anhe and Yu instinctively looked at each other, their faces not quite normal, and they turned their heads in agreement and didn't say much. Black Lie Fuzi is completely shy, after all, being known by a younger generation who is much younger than him. To play the role of a maid in a maid cafe is enough to make the other person discover that kind of thing. He would definitely think that I am a shameless woman, Black Lie Fuzi thought anxiously in his heart. On the other hand, Anhe had no idea how to talk. After all, this kind of thing was similar to being suddenly caught by his mother while rewarding him in a previous life, making it awkward to think about. I just didn't expect Mrs. Black to look gentle and virtuous. It turns out she also has that kind of need. After an awkward silence, Black Lie Fuzi seemed to suddenly think of something, slammed his forehead, and then bowed to Anhe, saying, I'm really sorry, Anhe Jun. My daughter just finished school, and I have to go home and cook for her first. Speaking of this, she showed a very embarrassed expression on her face and tugged at the hem of the maid's dress with both hands. Upon seeing this, Anhe glanced at the maid's attire on the other party's body and, recalling the hidden secret hint from the previous light curtain, tentatively asked, Is Mrs. Black Lie worried that wearing the maid's attire to pick up her daughter will have a bad impression? Upon hearing this, the Black Lie Fuzi blushed and nodded. In fact, she feels more embarrassed. After all, in her daughter's eyes, she has always dressed like a mature mother. Seeing her expression, Anhe pondered for a moment, then took off his suit-style school uniform jacket and handed it to Lie Fuzi, saying with a smile, then Lie Madam should wear this. As long as she covers her upper body, most people wouldn't recognize it as a maid's outfit, would they? This Looking at the clothes handed to him, the black rascal hesitated for a moment, but when he thought that his daughter might still be waiting for her at school, he gritted his teeth and immediately took the school uniform and said, "Thank you, Anhe." After speaking, she put on her school uniform directly. The clothes are a bit loose, but they look slightly smaller when fastened with buttons. Seeing that the issue with the clothes was resolved, Black Lai Fuzi said a few more words to Anhe and hurriedly left. Black Lai Fuzi had already left, so Anhe naturally didn't want to stay any longer. He then left the CAFA carrying the Rain Palace veil. Anhe found a small clinic nearby. Fortunately, after the doctor's examination, the condition of Yugong-ga's mist was not too serious. After receiving 2 bottles of intravenous drip and taking some medicine, he quickly regained consciousness. Although there is still some weakness, it is more caused by fasting. Leaving the clinic, it is already around 5 p.m. Looking at the silent Yugong-ga's beside her, Anhe thought that the other party was still on an empty stomach and immediately suggested, "Let's go eat something first. I think the snacks from that coffee shop before were quite good." Upon hearing his words, Yugong Shawu nodded in silence for a moment. Upon seeing this, Anhe also knew that the other person had a personality that didn't like to talk, and immediately didn't say much. The two quickly returned to the previous made CAFA and found a corner spot. Anhe ordered 7 or 8 snacks in a row before giving up. After waiting for the maid to leave, Anhe looked at Yugong Shawu across from him and asked softly, "How long has it been since we last ate?" At this moment, the latter was looking down at his thigh under the table in a daze, and only when he heard Anhe speak did he raise his head to look at him. After a moment, Yugong Shawu averted her gaze and whispered, "All the money was used up yesterday afternoon. How did you go to school today?" "Walking." After a brief conversation, Anhe fell into silence. He had originally planned to ask the other party why they didn't say anything to him, but then swallowed it again. "You really have a strong personality." Feeling emotional in her heart, Anhe noticed the wet clothes that had been changed from Yugong Shawu beside her and then changed the topic to ask, "How do clothes get wet?" This time, Yugong Shawu did not answer immediately and remained silent for more than half a minute. Just when Anhe thought the other party didn't want to speak, he spoke up. "I was fined for cleaning the swimming pool for being late, and then someone pushed me into the water." Upon hearing this, Anhe raised his eyebrows and unconsciously clenched his hand a bit, but remained calm and asked, "Was it intentional or accidental?" Yugong Shawu did not answer again, and Anhe did not ask further. He already has an answer in his heart. It seems necessary to find time to understand the situation of Yu Gongsha missed in the school. Just as she was thinking about it, the maid pushed the dining cart over. Upon seeing this, Anhe stood up and brought plates of snacks along with a cup of hot milk to Yugong Shawu, while he himself kept a glass of ice cream. Seeing Yugong Shawu, Anhe quickly covered the ice cream with his hand and explained with a smile, "You're still running a fever, so you can't eat this." Seeing his appearance, Yugong Shawu didn't even react. On the other hand, the maid beside her burst out laughing. Noticing their gaze, the maid quickly stopped laughing, coughed twice, and then explained, "Sorry miss, your boyfriend is really cute." After speaking, the maid blinked at the Rain Palace mist again, then turned around and pushed the dining cart away. Suddenly being praised for being cute, and he felt a bit awkward for a moment. Fortunately, at this moment, a crisp sound of the piano came from the center of the hall. Anhe turned his head and couldn't help but smile when he saw a maid playing with the piano in the coffee shop. Speaking of which, he has also studied piano for a few years in his lifetime. According to the evaluation of the light curtain, his piano level has reached proficiency level. If it weren't for the huge changes in his family later on, he might have gone down the path of plagiarism. Shaking his head, Anhe withdrew his thoughts and immediately looked at Yugong Shawu. However, to his surprise, the latter, who usually had no interest in anything, was staring straight at the piano. Seeing this, Anhe raised his eyebrows and curiously asked, "Can you play the piano?" His words brought Yugong Shawu back to her senses, and she immediately withdrew her gaze. Her eyes were gloomy as she shook her head towards the pizza emitting heat in front of her. "I have it at home, but I haven't touched it before." Upon hearing this, Anhe raised his eyebrows and glanced back and forth at Yugong Shawu and the piano before suddenly getting up and walking towards the piano. Subsequently, Yugong Shawu saw An and Yusheng walking up to the piano and talking to the maid miss who was wiping the piano. After a while, the maid nodded and then moved away, while Anhe sat directly in front of the piano. Can he play the piano? Yugong Shawu had just thought of this in her heart, and the next moment, a crisp and pleasant bell rang from the piano. The sound of the chime is cheerful, as if standing in front of a window in the morning. The gentle breeze blows, the wind chimes ring lightly, and the warm sun sprinkles on the face, dispelling all the gloom. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Unexpected Joy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Unexpected Joy. The piano piece played by Anhe is not a famous piece, but a theme song from an anime he has watched in his past life, Your Name. The reason for choosing this song is not only due to Anhe's preference, but more importantly, it itself carries a cheerful and relaxed atmosphere. He felt that playing this song was the most suitable for Yugong Shawu to listen to at this time. Because he hasn't played the piano for several years, Anhe just took out half of the 20 skill points he received in the morning and added them to the piano skill in order to prevent himself from falling off the chain. Now, his piano level has reached the master level. At the same level as Anhe's current highest painting skills. At the end of the song, after a brief silence in the small cafe, a series of applause erupted, including cheers from many girls. Seeing this, Anhe had to stand up and bow in gratitude. Watching everyone react on stage, you couldn't help but sneer in your heart. Just a small trick made these girls unable to close their legs, but it also suits your heart. I believe that now with just a little hint from you, there will be anxious little girls who want to communicate with you for a while. Can you have the fragrance of rain, palace gauze and mist, little sister? Anhe sneered at the aesthetic disdain of voiceovers. After saying a few more words to the enthusiastic maid, Anhe finally returned to Yugong Shawu's side. As soon as she sat down, Yugong Shawu curiously spoke up. You can also play the piano. I have a slight understanding. Although An and Yusheng were humble in their mouths, the proud expression on their faces couldn't be concealed. They almost said, "Ah, yes, I'm a piano master. Please praise me quickly." Upon seeing this, Yugong Shawu pursed her lips and didn't ask any more questions. She lowered her head and started eating the pizza on the plate. "Woman, you are indulging in sensual pleasures." Anhe wanted to say that, but he knew that Yugong Shawu's personality was just like that. So he picked up his expression and turned to enjoy Yugong Shawu's beautiful face while eating ice cream. It should be said that the Rain Palace mist is indeed beautiful. Even if it's an empty day, eating is still not urgent or slow, just like a kitten. Just looking at it, Anhe couldn't help but turn his gaze towards the seductive red lips. Recalling the morning kiss, Anhe instinctively pursed his lips. Noticing his gaze and movements, Yugong Shawu paused as she bit the pizza, but soon returned to normal. At this moment, the sound of footsteps from high heels came. Anhe looked back curiously and saw a middle-aged woman in an OL uniform, about 40 years old, approaching. "Hello, sir." The other party first politely spoke up, then took out a business card from their chest pocket and handed it to Anhe, saying, "I am the manager of this coffee shop, Yoshihiro Sato." Upon seeing this, Anhe took the business card, but did not go to look at it. Instead, he introduced himself and then looked at Yoshihiro Sato with a smile, asking, "Is Miss Sato okay?" Seeing that his face did not show any dissatisfaction as he took the business card, Yoshi Sato's eyes moved slightly and a smile immediately appeared on his face, explaining. "It's like this, sir. Just now I heard the piano piece you played and I really liked it. However, our coffee shop has been short of a pianist, so. Yoshihiro Sato didn't finish his later words, but everyone with a keen eye knew the other party's intentions. Upon hearing her intentions, Anhe's smile grew even stronger. I'm really dozing off. Please send me a pillow. He had originally planned to find a new job, but he didn't expect that just playing a piano would automatically bring the job to his door. However, Anhe is not in a hurry. Now that he has the dominant position, he still needs to strive for the benefits he deserves. Immediately, Anhe showed a troubled expression and said, "But I'm still a student, and I already have a part-time job." For his behavior, Yuki Sato, who had been struggling in society for decades, naturally saw through it at a glance, but her face did not show any abnormalities and instead smiled and said, "Is it possible to switch jobs? After all, what kind of job would be easier than doing what you love? As for going to school, that's not a problem. You should know that coffee shops usually open from afternoon to evening, so you only need to arrive before 6 o'clock. Old fox, did I assume to let me go to work before I even agreed?" Although Anhe thought so in his heart, he still put on a very conflicted expression. Sato Yaoshi raised his eyebrows upon seeing the situation and cursed the little fox in his heart before speaking again. "Is Mr. Anhe worried about his salary?" Upon hearing her words, Anhe put on a "how do you know" expression and then awkwardly scratched his head, explaining, "My current job's salary is quite high." Unexpectedly, before Anhe could finish speaking, Yuki Sato in front of him suddenly uttered a number. 4,000 in the eyes of Anhe, although Yoshihiro Sato's heart was dripping with blood, he gritted his teeth and continued, recalling the words of a prominent figure before. 4,000 yen an hour, how about Mr. Anhe? Upon hearing her words, Anhe, who had been hesitant before, suddenly showed a sincere smile on his face. He stood up and reached out his hand, smiling at Sato Yaoshi, "Please take care of me from now on. Please take good care of me in the future." Yuki Sato also reached out and shook hands with it. Subsequently, the two sides chatted for a moment and only left after confirming that they would start work tomorrow. Looking at the other person's back, Anhe felt particularly beautiful. After all, 4,000 was 5 times his salary when he was at a convenience store before. However, the next moment, the narrator in his mind instantly poured cold water on him. Although the other person is hiding it very well, you at the Wulong can tell at a glance that they have ulterior motives and seem to be hiding some hidden conspiracy. Thinking of this, your eyes squint slightly and you plan to use a trick to trick them. After understanding the other person's purpose, you will turn your back. By the way, the storage cabinet on the third left side of the dressing room belongs to this woman. Although she is getting older, she can't resist being well maintained, so she must cooperate. What? What kind of ghost conspired? Why didn't I see it? Anhe was somewhat surprised. Although the dog's narration is not a serious job, it should be said that it is definitely professional in providing information. Therefore, Anhe also remembered what the narrator had said about the possibility of the other party's conspiracy. "You wouldn't be plotting against my body, would you?" Thinking of the other person's age of over 40, An Enlingbyting trembled. However, in the next moment, a warm red scarf with a hint of girlish fragrance wrapped around his neck. What? Anhe looked at Yugong Shawu with confusion as he withdrew his hand. The latter pursed his lips and whispered, "I see you're shivering from the cold." After speaking, Yugong Shawu no longer looked at Anhe and lowered his head to eat the food on the plate. Anhe's heart warmed upon hearing this, and a smile couldn't help but appear on his face. Name: Yugong Shawu, current status: girl under the streetlight. She feels the light and tries to make the light also feel her, current favorability. 52, confident, note: you have quietly entered her heart. At the same time. Another corner of the coffee shop. Just now, Yuki Sato, who looked like a social elite, was bowing down and standing motionless like a dog waiting for its owner to touch its head. Standing in front of her stood a stunning woman in a black bathrobe with long hair coiled behind her head. A woman is very beautiful, with skin like frozen snow, lips like red cherry blossoms, a pair of peach blossom eyes that seem to captivate the heart, and a tear mole at the corner of the eye adds a touch of charm. But no one dares to look at such a woman in the coffee shop. Even without the courage to sneak a peek. The reason is due to the constant cold chill emanating from the woman, as well as the several black bodyguards standing around her. Did he agree? The woman picked up her coffee and casually asked while blowing in air. Upon hearing her words, Sato Yaoshi quickly returned. Madam Hui, the child agreed to come here every evening after that. Upon hearing this, the woman gently raised her chin with satisfaction, her red lips slightly parted, took a sip of coffee, put it down, and then stood up. Keep this position for me in the future. Her voice fell, and her gaze lingered for a moment on the piano that Anhe and Yusheng had played before. Then she added, tell him, if there are any other pieces like before, take them out. Speaking of this, the woman, feeling a bit tired, reached out and rubbed her temples, complaining, recently, some people in the group are not very honest, and the noise has been bothering me. Upon hearing this, Sato Yaoshi quickly lowered his head to respond, while several bodyguards behind the woman silently glanced at each other. The woman left, but it wasn't until the other person completely walked out of the coffee shop that Yashiki Sato dared to look up. Watching the extended car disappear, Sato Yaoshi sighed helplessly as he recalled his wife's last words. There will be a few more barrels of cement in Tokyo Bay tonight. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Scarves. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Scarves. All they ordered were some snacks, and the two of them didn't eat for long before leaving the coffee shop around 6 o'clock. The sun is setting in the west, and the sky is dim. Because the school uniform was given to Hei Lai Shizi, Anhe was only wearing a white shirt. When the cold wind blew, he couldn't help but shiver. Tightening the scarf around her neck, and then Guang noticed that the nearby Yugong Shaowu was only wearing a white shirt. Without hesitation, Anhe pulled the latter to his side and divided the scarf around his neck in half, wrapping it around Yugong's snow-white neck. The latter did not resist from beginning to end, just blinked his big eyes and quietly gazed at Anhe. Everything is done, and Anhe looked at Yugong Shaowu, who was tightly wrapped in a scarf, and nodded with satisfaction. He said, done, go home. His words made Yugong Shaowu's eyes twitch, and after a moment of silence, she nodded. Considering the fog and injuries caused by the rain palace gauze, Anhe did not choose to take the subway, but instead took a luxurious taxi. This also caused his small treasury to shrink once again, but when he thought about having a good job tomorrow, Anhe didn't pay much attention. On the car, Yugong Shaowu quietly gazed out the window at the constantly passing night view of Tokyo, while Anhe sat on the side, clubbing his head and quietly watching her profile. Because the two of them were wearing the same scarf, they sat very close and almost pressed together. Anhe could even clearly feel the warm and soft touch coming from the other person's thighs, but before he could express any thoughts on it, the narrator in his mind jumped out first. Feeling the soft touch emanating from beneath you, your heart couldn't help but wander. Your gaze peeked at the driver in the front row, who was currently focused on driving and probably wouldn't have noticed the situation in the back row. Why don't you take this opportunity to place your hand on the lap of the person next to you? If she hadn't resisted, then slowly taking a closer look would have been very exciting in the car. You think it's quite beautiful. Anhe couldn't help but roll his eyes, but his gaze still instinctively swept over the slender and snow-white legs of Yugong Shaowu. It's really white. There was nothing to say all the way, and the taxi quickly arrived at the designated location in Anhe. After paying to get off the car, Anhe brought Yugong Shaowu to the nearby supermarket to buy some snacks and vegetables. After all, Anhe planned to wait for the next chef to show Yugong Shaowu some tricks. Everything is done, and it's already dark. The apartment where Anhe lives was not equipped with lights in the hallway due to its old age, which resulted in the two having to go upstairs in the dark. Anhe actually wanted to take out his flip phone to light up, although the light was weak, at least he could see the steps clearly. But this idea was immediately extinguished by Anhe as soon as the two of them entered the hallway. As for the reason, watching the rain palace mist tightly pressed against her side, even nervous enough to grab the corner of her clothes with her hands, and his lips slightly raised and quietly stuffed the phone she had taken halfway back into her pocket. Unknowingly holding onto the other person's delicate jade hand, Anhe could clearly feel a slight stiffness in Yugong Shawwoo's body, but he did not resist. The 4-story staircase used to take less than a minute to walk, but today it took more than 5 minutes to walk. But no matter how long the road is, there will eventually be a moment when we finish walking. Arriving at her own door, Anhe reluctantly released Yugong Shawwoo's hand, took off her scarf and wrapped it all around Yugong's neck. Finally, she took out the key from her pocket and opened the door. Entering the room, Anhe first touched the side wall, accompanied by a snap sound, and the entrance lights lit up, illuminating the originally pitch-black living room. "Welcome home." Anhe leaned against the door and smiled as he watched Yugong Shawwoo still standing at the door. The latter was clearly taken aback when he heard his words, and his gaze lingered on An and Yusheng's face for a moment before he lowered his head and walked in. "Thank you." She spoke softly, her voice as gentle as a kitten. Seeing this, Anhe smiled but did not answer. When Yugong Shawwoo entered the room, Anhe closed the door and then found his own slippers to put on Yugong Shawwoo. As for him, he walked barefoot into the living room. "You sit on the sofa for a while, and I'll go to the kitchen to cook something," Anhe said, placing the snacks in his hand on the coffee table, then turning on the big TV and handing the remote control to Yugong Shawwoo before walking towards the kitchen. Looking at his back, Yugong Shawwoo's eyes twitched slightly, not knowing what was on her mind. Arriving at the kitchen, Anhe washed and cut half of the black chicken he had bought in the supermarket into small pieces, then added some ingredients to the pot and simmered over low heat. Yugong Shawwoo only had a fever during the day, so he planned to give the other party a patch. The chicken soup needs to be boiled for a long time, and the Yugong gauze has just finished dim sum, so Anhe doesn't plan to cook now. Returning to the living room, Anhe saw Yugong Shawwoo sitting honestly on the sofa like a primary school student. As for the TV station opposite her, it is still the one Anhe opened before, and now it is playing boring advertisements. Seeing this, Anhe walked over and lightly patted the fragrant shoulder of Yugong's gauze mist. Seeing the latter's eyes, he explained, "Would it be convenient to change clothes? If you don't mind, wear my old clothes first. Your clothes belong to Madame Black Lie, who lives next door. I plan to wash them and return them to them later." Upon hearing his words, Yugong Shawwoo nodded, although she was in a semi-coma during the day and couldn't remember who Hailai Shizi was. Leading Yugong Shawwoo into the bedroom, Anhe carefully selected a white T-shirt, black knee-length shorts, and a black hooded hoodie for her. As for underwear, Anhe can only indicate helplessness. His underwear was all worn by himself, although clean, he was not sure if Yugong Shawwoo would dislike it, so he didn't mention it. Leaving the bedroom, Anhe waited outside the door for a while before the door was opened again. Wearing a white T-shirt and black knee-length shorts, with all her tender arms and legs exposed outside, Yugong Shawwoo walked out holding a pile of clothes. Upon seeing this, Anhe quickly took it and then carried it all into the bathroom. Seeing Yugong Shawwoo wanting to follow in, Anhe quickly stopped her and pushed her back to the living room, explaining, "You just had a fever during the day and it's not suitable to touch water. Let me wash it." Speaking, Anhe didn't wait for Yugong Shawwoo to agree and casually picked up the other party's damp JK uniform on the table before returning to the bathroom. Looking at Anhe's back, Yugong Shawwoo pursed her lips and felt an inexplicable sensation in her heart. On the other side, inside the bathroom. Due to habitual reasons, Anhe has a habit of digging out his pockets before washing clothes. This is not only because he is afraid that something will crush the washing machine, but also because he is afraid that valuable items such as money will be soaked in water. Sure enough, as Anhe flipped through, he quickly pulled out a lot of things from the JK set of Yugong Shawu. Student ID, medical insurance certificate, hair clip, rubber band, and a small white medicine bottle. The medicine bottle was filled with English letters, and Anhe English was pretty good, so he quickly recognized the content on it. Zolpidem tartrate is a crystalline sleeping pill. God really helps me. I was worried about how to make that female teacher obedient in the morning, and now I have obtained such a treasure. With it, all you need to do is deceive the woman Shigeru Ito into her home, mix these medicines into the water she needs to drink, and wait until the effect takes effect. When the time comes. End of this chapter.